Welcome everyone to Gamer Meld. As many of you know, I was at CES last week and I got the opportunity to sit down with AMD's Senior Product Manager Scott Stankard and Senior Technical Marketing Manager Robert Halleck to chat about Ryzen 4000. Now I wasn't going to post it because the video looks pretty bad, but there's a ton of great information here, so I figured you would enjoy it. Just please forgive me for the graininess and audio. I had to crank the ISO up a good bit, and there was a ton of background noise to get rid of. Also, the discussion with AMD's Radeon division will be on the GamerMeld Patreon if you're interested in checking that out.
Started where I said how jealous I've been about getting a Zen 2 core into a laptop, and when Lisa spoke, this is what she talked about, right? Is like, how do you build the best laptop processor? It's that Zen 2 core with 15% better IPC that we did in desktop 6 months ago, along with the 7 nanometers. You're doing that, but now we're also folding in the power management that you need on a laptop so you can have great battery life, right? And that, like, at the heart, very simply, that's what this is. And what we're seeing and what you saw in some of the bar charts that she showed is just phenomenal performance that we're bringing in a super small TDP of just 15 watts. Now we are offering a 15 watt, we're offering a 45 watt for gamers and content creators. And then we also do have an enterprise version of this that we mentioned, but we're not really talking about too much yet, but you'll see that coming more in the future.
So like a pro?
Yeah, a pro, exactly.
Pro version.
Exactly. So, but that's at the heart of what this is. And we jump to just some specs. She didn't show this slide, but this is in the slides that you have access to. We have two Ryzen 7s, both with 8 cores. This is our 15 watt U-Series lineup, right? Two Ryzen 7s, both with 8 cores. One of them with SMT on, so 8 cores, 16 threads, just 15 watts. Something the other guys just can't do. Obviously, we love it. Anytime we can do something that only we can do, and that's what this is right here. The other thing I'd note is this is, of course, a year of technology transition for us, going from 12 nanometers to 7. Now, if you might recall, when the other guys tried to make their technology transition, they had to back way off on frequency.
Yeah, they lost 18% frequency.
Yeah, right? And we're actually increasing. Yeah, we're actually increasing our frequency from last year. So it's so 4 gigahertz last year, 4.2 gigahertz this year, right?
That's definitely something that I've been pretty impressed about because, man, I know going to 10 nanometers, like you guys said, and I know Intel's been having some issues as far as being able to scale, it seems, at least. That's what most of the rumors suggest. But yeah, the fact that you guys have been able to continue to do that is definitely something. Is the quick question? I think this was actually asked the other day at a conference or at a roundtable meeting, but maybe you could give some more insight into it. I mean, is there anything specific that you guys are doing that's allowing you to do this? Because we know that this is something that is really difficult to do when moving into smaller transistor nodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Specific, certainly. And I'll name two things, but one is the Zen 2 core is just phenomenal, right? What you saw on the desktop side as far as how well that was winning, it starts there because you need that core to really have the capability to hit those frequencies and to be able to deliver that kind of performance, which is, the IPC uplift times the frequency that you can hit is ultimately where you're getting that performance out of it, right? So the Zen 2 core is what I highlight first because when you see Lisa talk at, whether it's this show or past shows, what she continues to talk about is how it's not just a flash in the pan for us, right? It was Zen 2. She said, hey, Zen 3's coming. We've even started working on future Zens. And so that sort of repeated execution is really what's at the heart of our comeback and what is fueling our trajectory going forward as well. So starts there. 7 nanometers doesn't hurt either, right? That's a great technology. But that's really, it's that focus on the architecture is where I would start the conversation.
One thing I would say as well about architectures is our competitor has been fundamentally running on the Skylake architecture since 2016. And if you think about the architecture timeline of development, it's about 5 years. So we're now at 2020. That means the same architecture has basically been sustained for 9 continuous years from the start of development until today. We have an architecture that started in development like 2012 and debuted for the first time in 2017. So from a design standpoint, it's much newer. And so it is more in line with the manufacturing technologies that are available today, and therefore it is easier to scale that architecture down to lower power and smaller transistor sizes because it was built to expect them. If you go back to Skylake, that was originally 2014, but what process node? 32, 28?
Oh,
God, I don't remember the transistor size. Significantly larger.
Yeah, a long time ago, right?
I think it was like 26.
32 nanometer. I don't remember. Large by today's standards. So, architecture, designing an architecture is also, there's an ingredient of it where you're designing for the process nodes that it's going to be built on. There's certain ways to lay out circuits and transistors and pathways inside that chip, because you know that a certain process node will be capable of making that circuit, just to put it simply. And so we have a much newer architecture and are better able to see where 14 nanometer, 12 nanometer, 7 nanometer we're going and build around that. And so that's the other half of how we are getting to the point that we're at.
Gotcha.
So it's phenomenal part. One thing Lisa showed was, and the difference between us and what you see from the other guys is, across the board, it's a winning part. Single-threaded performance. This is versus their best Ice Lake they can come to market with. Single-threaded performance, we win. Multi-threaded performance, 90% win. And even on graphics, I know Intel made a lot of investment in that Ice Lake graphics. That basically caught them up to the product we launched last year, right? And so here you see beating that by 28% with our 4000 series product. So we'll continue to be the win. And what you'll see when the platforms get out in the wild and we start benchmarking them is it's the same story where it's just across the board we're winning, which is very much the same story you saw when Zen 2 was in the desktop space, right?
Yeah, like a low single-digit, single-threaded leadership, which is hard to come by these days. Mm-hmm. A lot of multi-threaded leadership because we have more density, more cores in the package. And then, with that graphics now, a lot faster.
Yeah. I actually have a question about this particular one. Is there any reason you didn't try to compare it to Intel's Cascade Lake?
Comet Lake.
Comet Lake, yes.
Yeah, we could put Comet Lake on here, and the single thread. I
don't have the plot here for you, right? Okay. But like visually,
you can ballpark it.
Yeah, like ballparking it, right? That Ice Lake is 4 cores, right? And what you see is their Ice Lake to their 14 nanometer. There's really not much difference in those parts at all, right?
Yeah, I know.
So
it has better accuracy, but then it loses the clock.
That's right.
Right. So add 2 more cores for them. I would ballpark it as give them another 50% on the multi-threaded performance, and we still have a really big win, right? Yeah. So the other thing that they're running into is thermal problems at that point, right? Because they're on that older 14 nanometer technology, and so they just can't get all the performance out of that 6-core 12-thread part.
Intense throttle quickly.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So and so our decision. So we had this conversation internally. It's like, all right, we're going to launch our product, and they've made such a mess of the market because they've got 2 products, and we were at risk of being drawn into their mess by trying to show our product against Ice Lake and Comet Lake, and how many bar charts do you want to look at in 30 minutes? So what we said is we're going to go head-to-head, our latest and greatest product and technology against their latest and greatest product and technology, core and technology, and that's what we'll show. You'll find that we win against Comet Lake for sure.
And that's what I was thinking, and probably just because it's their 10 nanometers. It was just the fact that they have more cores than Comet Lake, so that's why I wanted to ask. But the fact that you even were willing to give a ballpark estimate kind of says a lot. So.
The other thing I want to point out, here you see the graphics leadership. The other thing we took a close look at was gaming in a 15-watt TDP, because if you think about everybody, like that golden bar you want to achieve is 1080p gaming at 60 frames a second, and traditionally that's the domain of an actual gaming laptop. But what you'll see here as we move into our 4000 series is really great frame rates, and a lot of times nearly 60 frames a second or even better. First of all, we're beating the competition, so this is the best Ice Lake graphics they can bring. We're beating them, sometimes significantly so, especially the more graphics intensive games you see. Those are the ones where we're winning the most. And games like Overwatch and GTA 5, I would call those pretty much unplayable experiences out of Ice Lake, and we're taking those to almost 60 frames a second. So that's the kind of experience that we can enable in even an ultra thin laptop now that you used to have to get a gaming laptop in order to do. So we felt like there's a pretty exciting thing that you can do in ultra thins now.
Go ahead.
And this is on the 8 CU.
Yes.
And
at 15 watts.
That's another question a lot of people were wanting to know, or at least I was. You guys moved down.
Correct.
From 11 to 8, and I know there's a little bit of conversation about this, but if you could possibly expand on, I mean, it is definitively Vega.
Sure.
Yes, it
is.
is.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely Vega.
But it's like an updated 7 nanometer
Yeah.
version of Vega. And is there a reason you didn't do more? Did you not have room?
Well, no. If you think about the design flow, right, and when you create a new processor, a new APU that has the graphics in the cores, you have to have that IP, ready years in advance to be able to launch, right? And just where the development timeline was for Navi, it just wasn't ready in time to integrate into an APU, because you've got to get the cores, you got to get the graphics, you got to get the SoC wrapped all around that, and then still do all of your validation and testing. We did launch Navi into the desktop space, but what you need to do to get it into a laptop is also get the power performance optimizations, make it laptop friendly, and just that work means that you need a little bit more time to get it into an APU.
I would say one other thing too is that when you're in the mobile space, overall die size, just in general, die size is very important, but mobile space die size is especially important. So if we can make steps at an architectural level to reduce the number of graphics compute units to make that die size smaller, but still come out ahead in performance, that's a step that's worth taking financially. And so for each CU that we have, so just take one graphics CU from last year versus one from this year, inclusive of all the changes, we're 59% faster this year.
I thought it was 56.
It's somewhere in that range, depending on what benchmark you run.
I'm actually not arguing. I was just
you're
saying,
absolutely right.
That's great.
56
that's
to
even better.
56
Yeah,
to
I think
60%.
Lisa said 59. I read an article, somebody quoted it as 56. So
Then that may have been
It's
it.
somewhere in that range. So
Yeah.
if you do the math, if you take 8 compute units and multiply it by 1.59, that equals 27-28%. If we could pop up that 3D mark. So if you were to put our last year top end on this chart on the right on the 3D mark time spot, it would be equal to the 1065 G7. And so if we did that math, 1.59 times 8 CUs, there's about 28%.
You're still getting a pretty big boost.
So part for part, if we take last year's top end and this year's top end, we're about 30% ahead due to all the changes, even with the fewer CUs. And there's a couple ingredients for that, and I know people are curious about it. One, higher clock speed. We were at 1500 megahertz last year. We're at 1750 this year. So that's a 17% clock increase thanks to 7 nanometer. I think people, in asking this question, are also underestimating how much faster the Zen 2 core is. Because when you're just talking about integrated graphics performance, the CPU and the GPU are very, very interrelated. And so if you can make that CPU core that much faster year over year, well, that helps the GPU go faster year over year as well. Lastly, and this one's harder to characterize and explain, is when our boost is working, when our CPUs are working, we're constantly analyzing how intense that workload is. And by that I mean, if you ran FurMark, one thread of FurMark is very different from one thread of 3D Mark or one thread of Google Chrome, right? One thread is not one thread necessarily. And so we're always asking, how intensely is that thread using the compute unit or this particular circuit inside the compute unit? And as you characterize more workloads and better understand them, you can say, maybe that's not as intense as we thought it was, and you can boost ever so slightly higher than you were the year before. And so what happens is the average frequency of that workload goes up. We're not talking about a boost frequency here, but just what clock speed does that particular workload run at? And that's what we mean when we say power performance optimization. Squeezing that last couple percent out of every workload by better understanding how that workload uses our silicon.
Gotcha.
And so those ingredients can help us squeeze the extra out of each computer.
Okay, great.
one other interesting angle that you can take with this is, our U-Series products are nominally 15 watts, but they are configurable up to 25. Mm-hmm. And what Lenovo has announced in the Yoga Slim 7 does exactly that. They're taking that, they're actually configuring it up to 25 watts, but they're keeping it in this ultra thin sub 15 millimeter platform. It's just beautiful. We have one out here if you haven't seen it. It's a really amazing platform, super thin, super light, and that is a fantastic product. And our first ever product with LPDDR4X memory. So that helps on the battery life side as well. So this is going to be a really, really good product, and I think this is going to be one example of our technology, at its best.
Yeah. Do you have any performance metrics at 25 watts?
Not yet, but we will.
Okay.
So I think people are curious to see the design wins, learn more about the architecture of the chip, and understand battery life. And as a phase 2 after CES, that's the kind of information we'll be disclosing next.
Okay.
So I know people ask, just tell them this quarter they're going to hear from us, and all those details will become public. We're just not ready yet.
Gotcha.
So moving on to our H-Series, our 45-watt bars. So these are the parts that are targeted at gamers, content creators. This is a space actually we effectively entered for the first time in gaming laptop parts just last year. And we had a phenomenal year with our Ryzen 7 3750H and our Ryzen 5 3550H, right? Really, really good year, especially considering our first year in the market there. And this year we are bringing that Zen 2 core in. And as you can imagine, it is just a game winner there. Here's the 2 SKUs, and I'll show you some benchmarks here in a minute. But the Ryzen 7 4800H with 8 cores and 16 threads, and the Ryzen 5 4600H with 6 cores and 12 threads. And what you'll notice from a spec perspective, it's the same boost frequency, that 4.2 gigahertz. That's the same boost frequency you saw in the U-Series, because really boost frequency isn't really determined by your TDP. The TDP, starts to limit your base frequency and how many cores, your effective frequency for all your cores, right? So that's where you see that base frequency of 2.9 gigahertz comes into play. That's significantly higher than in 15 watts, of course.
Is there an all-core boost?
It changes with every workload.
Gotcha.
So one of the things, actually that question tells me you spend a lot of time with Intel processors.
I go back and forth. I try to do
No,
the
that's
best I
fair.
can. Yeah.
So actually our boost and Intel's boost works very different. I wish I had a whiteboard. In that Intel has what you would call like a bimodal boost, where they spend a certain number of seconds at a higher power state and then drop to a lower power state. And it doesn't matter how many threads you're running. Whereas our workload, our boost technology says how many threads, how intensely are those threads using the circuits, what is the CPU temperature, what is the temperature of the external environment, how intensely are the voltage regulators on the motherboard being used, how much power are we pulling from the socket. And you can actually kind of draw it as a triangle with temperature, CPU socket power, and motherboard current. And if you're not bumping into any one of those corners, you can continue to boost up until the maximum clock speed of the chip. And so if you have a very light workload with many threads, you get a lot of boost. If you have a heavy workload with many threads, you'll get less. But we don't define any set points where the chip would snap to. So that allows us to extract more performance.
I was just going to say, I do know that you guys kind of, I've spent plenty of time, especially with the Zen 2 desktop.
Yeah.
I do know that things are all over the place, definitely, and there isn't like this set, okay, we've reached this threshold, bam, we're here, and then bam, right? No, I gotcha.
And it's going to depend, for notebooks like these especially, it's really going to depend on the thermal solution.
Yes.
And like, if somebody asked me, what's your all-core boost on a 3950X on desktop, I'd be like, well, it's like 4.2, 4.3-ish, depends on your cooler. But notebook is so different, it's really hard to peg down a number.
That's true. So with this H-Series, I mentioned it's just providing significantly better performance thanks to that Zen 2 core. And here's what I want to show you. So, and I'll tell you the story. So as we were developing this product, we saw what 8 cores and 16 threads could do, and we had no doubt it's definitely going to beat that i7 9750H. So no surprise there. But what we did just for fun as we were looking into it was like, wow, that is such a good score. I wonder how we compare to a desktop part. And so that's one of the things that Frank showed in the presentation was at the left is that 9750H, and in the middle is a 9700K desktop part at 95 watts. Not only do we completely blow away the 9750H, but we're actually beating that 9700K. This here happens to be a 3D Mark Firestrike physics score, right? Trying to separate out the GPU from the CPU part of gaming. So this just tells you at the heart of Zen 2 and our 4000 series product, what kind of gaming experience you can get out of this.
Yeah, I actually did a video after the presentation on this. Definitely impressive. Once again, this is just purely just a side of me that always thinks both sides. Why not go up against Intel's 8-core i9?
So here's our perspective on it. The 8-core, like you said, it's an i9, right? And you see that we're branding this a Ryzen 7. So what we want to do here is when we're coming at them in this market space, I just want to obliterate them, right? And so that's why we chose to bring 8 cores where they've only got 6 cores there.
So price point wise,
it's I would consider it more like the value proposition for the person buying that laptop. We want to disrupt everything we touch. That's one of Lisa's other themes, right? Is we disrupted desktops, we disrupted high-end desktop, we disrupted server because of the way our strategy is of bringing more cores and threads. That's what we wanted to do in ultra thins, and that's what you see us doing here in gaming laptops, where we want to bring a desktop-like experience into a gaming laptop, and in a way that you can keep it thin without going like super muscle book kind of. You see how Intel's kind of pushing more to these thicker, heavier things, right, and higher powers. We wanted to take a completely different approach to this market, and that's what we're doing here, and that's why we wanted to bring this as a Ryzen 7, really provide a strong value proposition versus what Intel has there.
So you're just saying that this is where your target competition is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Look at it on the desktop side. This is a perfect example because everybody's familiar with our desktop stack. Core i5 to Ryzen 5. We have more cores. Core i7 to Ryzen 7. More cores.
And they're there.
Ryzen 9, Core i9 cores, right?
Yeah.
We do that because for each 5, 7, 9 brand that people know in their head, we want to offer more compute performance. Mm-hmm. So we made that same decision on the mobile side as well.
Well, and they're there because of like price point.
Sure.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you trying to say that the price point of the 4800H is closer to the 9750H versus rather than the?
Without talking specifically about pricing, right? Because the other part of this is like what we charge an OEM for a CPU is so disconnected from the system price.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from a branding perspective,
just branding,
I think your head's in the right place about it. Yeah.
I think you would imagine 2 analogous notebooks at about the same price, and we would offer 8 and they would offer 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. And have I looked at the 8-core i9 versus how well we're doing here? Yeah, I have. And they're if you want to think about this as us bringing an i9 level performance into a Ryzen 7, yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to think about it.
Okay. Gotcha.
That was gaming, content creation, similar story, right? A lot of gaming laptops are used for content creation. And so here, this is a Cinebench for rendering, and it's the same story, slightly different uplifts, but again, beating that i7 by 46% and even beating that 9700K at, bringing less than half the TDP and still beating them.
Yeah.
So again, just it's that kind of disruption story, that kind of bringing experiences to new form factors that you just couldn't get before.
Definitely.
I mean, it's been a decade of quad core.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
One other, again, you look at the partnerships that we have. I mentioned the partnership with Lenovo there. Here's a cool partnership that we do with ASUS where nominally that part's 45 watts, but it's configurable down to 35. And what we've done with ASUS, in fact, is taken a 35 watt version of this. We've given it specific HS branding to communicate really to the end user that this is a different type of part. This is more of a lifestyle, more of a content creator part. In my mind, S stands for slim. That's what I think of it as. That's not like an official, like you're going to find that on a fact tag somewhere. But in my mind, I think, because that's really where we're going with this, right? And so what ASUS has done here is, you notice the skin on this, it's not an aggressive gaming notebook skin, right? It really speaks to content creators. And they've done that in the way that it looks. They've done that with the LEDs, the way that you can personalize it and everything, right? That's a very content creator kind of thing to do. And you see it in the size and the weight of the system. Sub 18 millimeters, that's just amazingly thin.
Like this, actually.
Yeah. No, I mean, we got, oddly enough, we got a chance to see it at NVIDIA's suite. So, no, it is really nice. So, what you said, so the 4800H is actually configurable down, and that's basically, so it's not necessarily its own new, completely different chip.
Correct.
Designed specifically for this. It's a configured down.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when you configure the chip down, it does require a certain amount of validation and engineering effort between both of us. So that's why
I'm not trying to downplay.
No, of course. And we wanted to give them that extra brand to essentially to award them for that effort they went through with us.
So are we going to see more configured down 35 watt 4800H
I'm sure that
processors?
I'm sure that
Are they
I
also
think
going to be
there is
branded the same, or?
So the HS brand is exclusive to ASUS at the moment. In the future, who knows? But if somebody wants to take a 4800H and still call it 4800H but configure it to 35 watts, that's certainly possible. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in doing that. We'll have to see what OEMs do.
Yeah.
But I think there's, just because of the way that we can bring a great experience in just 35 watts even, and if they want to keep that laptop really thin, I think that's going to be really cool for offerings.
No, I definitely thought it was pretty nice. Which this is actually one question that I definitely had, because I've seen you guys. I see that they have this is configured with the 1650 Ti or 1660 Ti or 2060. Right. Now that you are, or AMD is definitely competing with Intel very well in the higher end Ultrabook and then higher end H processors, which kind of was before, but definitely now. Do you see yourself working with NVIDIA more for like the higher end, like the 2080, which right now AMD isn't able to bring to the table?
I think this is a perfect example, actually, because it's the first 14-inch RTX 2060 notebook. So doing something for the very first time is always scary, dangerous for any company. And so this year they actually bet on AMD to do that, right? They took RTX 2060, which is 2060, 2070, 2080. Those are flagship products from NVIDIA. And they worked with Asus and us to build the first 14-inch notebook with one of their flagship products. And there is no Intel alternative for this notebook either.
Yeah.
It's AMD only. So I think that speaks highly of what vendors like Asus and NVIDIA are going to accomplish with AMD this year, because already it's like the 7th day in the year, 8th day in the year, 9th. It's my brother's birthday today. It's the 9th day in the year, and they're already willing to do first of its kind and one of a kind designs with us.
And in a larger sense, your question was about like premium designs in general, and yes, absolutely, you're going to find more premium designs with AMD, with Ryzen 4000 series products than what we've been able to do in the past. And one of the more recent ones was Surface, right? Like that's the type of design you're going to continue to see us win, and so that's a focus. And you're going to see those, but at the same time, like if you think about where the volume is, it's not the 2080, right? And it's not even the 2070. So we're gonna make a lot of money in the rest of the market, but you're going to see some more premium designs as well.
Okay. But I mean, I know that,
just from a pure CPU performance perspective, we're absolutely there. Like somebody would do a 3900X and a 2080 on the desktop, they could do it here.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to.
Do you, with the fact that obviously Intel is also now starting to work on the GPU side, I'm sure NVIDIA is not very happy about that. So I mean, do you see AMD working with NVIDIA just more in general, I guess, in the future, with the fact that you do have the much higher end CPU processors, and then like I said, with Intel also moving into their space?
I think there is this belief that we might have an adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
When in truth, when new NVIDIA cards are in development on the Ryzen side, we get them before they're released to do validation and testing on our platform. And before we released both Threadripper and Ryzen this year, NVIDIA got sample allocation of those so they could do validation on their GPUs. So for us, we view it as a business relationship. It's an opportunity for us to both grow together, because people want to buy NVIDIA cards and they want to buy Ryzen CPUs, so why not?
Yeah.
And either way, it's an AMD customer, because if it's an AMD CPU, NVIDIA GPU, that's revenue for us. Or if it's Intel CPU, Radeon graphics card, it's still revenue for us.
Yeah.
So that is a technical and business relationship that exists at AMD, and happy to do it.
Would you say we're frenemies?
Frenemies.
Yeah.
Because the other thing to think about is if you're NVIDIA, you want the best CPUs. You want your graphics cards to work and be validated on the best CPUs, right? And it's like, okay, let's go with Ryzen there. And as we grow in the market space, it's just going to make a lot of sense for both of us to continue to work together. The other thing Frank talked about is SmartShift. He described this really well. If you think about a way the thermal solution is in a laptop, it's sort of like one shared chunk of metal, right? And you've got a CPU under there and a GPU under there, and you size that thermal solution such that if the CPU is 40 watts, for example, and the GPU is 60 watts, it's a 100-watt thermal solution. But what a typical platform doesn't understand is if the CPU isn't using all of its power, it doesn't understand that, hey, maybe there's power and headroom to boost the GPU. Or vice versa, if the GPU is not using all of its power, maybe you could boost the CPU. And the typical platform doesn't understand that. But because it's an AMD CPU, an AMD GPU, we're actually having those guys talk directly together, not even going through the OS, because that requires more time if you're going through an OS tick instead of directly talking to each other, right? And so now we can talk directly to each other. And when the CPU isn't using all of his allocated power budget, he just tells the GPU, says, hey buddy, I'm not using all my stuff, you go ahead and boost, and he will, and vice versa. And what Frank showed through that demonstration was about a 10% performance improvement while playing an actual game, frames per second, right? So really cool technology, something you can do with AMD technology together, and I think you'll see more of those types of working together and advantages that we can do together.
Will we ever? I don't know if there would even be use, since there obviously isn't anywhere near the same limitations as our own laptop. Will we ever see anything like this transition over to desktop, or is there no reason?
Because you're not TDP constrained, and there's no shared thermal solution, and water cooling loop doesn't count. There's no shared thermal solution, so you're not constrained by the same things.
That's true. So I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one's really cool. Like, you know how we have the Infinity Fabric inside our CPU?
Yes.
It just extends the domain of the Infinity Fabric outside of the chip to also include the external graphics card. So the external graphics card is now being treated by the management unit on the CPU as if the GPU were inside the processor. Wow. And it's just this virtual partition, and they're sending performance counter messages back and forth to determine when to boost. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So that's 4000 series in a nutshell. The other thing that we didn't talk about in the press conference, so I want to make sure and spend a few minutes on here, is our Athlon 3000 series product. So we are introducing two new Athlon 3000 series this year. It's the AMD Athlon Gold 3150U and the AMD Athlon Silver 3050U. If I take you back to a year ago at CES, we announced our 3000 series Ryzen mobile products. Ryzen 7, Ryzen 5, more the top of the stack, and it went down as far as we had one Athlon. And in my mind, the price point of a system you'd find with an Athlon was probably around $450 plus or minus. What we wanted to do was bring that to even better price points. Because, not everybody can afford a $700 laptop or a $1,000, right? And, if somebody's buying a $400 laptop or a $300 laptop, if they're buying AMD, I want them to have a really good experience, right? And so the way that we can do that is by bringing the same Zen core that people in higher price points have enjoyed, bringing that down into this Athlon space and down into price points where, the OEM sets the price, but I think you'll find this in certainly sub $400, maybe even sub $300 systems. You'll find a Zen core now. And that's something that you just wouldn't be able to find in the past.
And to be clear, it's 14 nanometer Zen 1.
Yes.
Okay, that I thought that it was Zen 1, but I mentioned that pretty quickly in the video that is going to be coming out. But my question actually with that, do you see Athlon ever getting into Chromebooks, or?
Can't speak to future things that haven't been announced yet.
Okay.
There's no technical restriction why it couldn't. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
It would just come down to an ODM wanting to do
it with a Chromebook. Okay.
When I mentioned the performance and the experience difference that we're bringing, I'll share this bar chart with you as an example. This is our Athlon Gold versus the Pentium Gold that's in market today. And what you see is because we're bringing that Zen core, huge single thread wins, huge multi-thread wins, huge graphics wins. That's what we're doing with bringing Zen into this market space. So somebody who buys that $400 laptop, that $300 laptop, they are going to walk away loving their experience because of this.
I want to put a fine point on this. The gray bar is currently the best performance you can get if you're going to buy a $400-ish laptop. And so we're coming into this market essentially for the first time and offering 50% more CPU performance and nearly 100% more graphics performance.
Yeah.
So, not a bad value proposition.
What kind of integrated GPU does the Athlon series have?
It's going to be
That's a
Vega.
So, yeah, that's still Vega. And did we write it on this slide? We did not put it on the slide. It could have up to three
CUs.
Three CUs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the gold. So specifically, the gold has 3, and the silver has.
And the
like
silver,
2,
if I recall, has 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And and that's for us. That was just to provide a little bit of differentiation, give somebody who's getting that gold, because you're covering a pretty wide part of the market. So what we wanted to do is provide differentiation in graphics and your differentiation in terms of core performance, because we have SMT on the gold, but not on the silver, right? So we're out of time, aren't we?
We are.